from full-on trust in my husband, that he is for me and that he's doing great things for us, the two of us, to, oh my God, can I believe anything?
There's a real difference between guilt and shame that comes across in that, guilt says I have done something bad and shame says I am bad.
It takes both of us to commit to the marriage. It takes both of us to decide we're going down this trail together.
Welcome to Hope Reforged, the podcast where we champion married couples from pornography addiction to a life of freedom, restoration, and unity. We know the road can be tough, but we're here to walk it together. It's time to break free from the chains of fear and shame. Experience Hope Reforged.
So I remember, going through this and being in a place where all I saw was divorce as the only option really for us moving forward. There was no us moving forward in our marriage anymore. This was kind of the end of it, is what I thought. I saw myself in a place where I was trapped. I didn't know how to get out of it, and I didn't want you to be stuck in the marriage with me in a place where I was stuck. So that's when I came to you and said, here's what's going to happen. We're going to get divorced. And that was my strategy. And and of course, you had a different response to that, saying that, no, I want us to, have you tried everything? And my answer to that was, well, yeah, I've tried everything. And well, have you gotten help? Well, no, I haven't gotten help. Right? So
you thought you could fix it.
You want to fix this on your own. You want this to stay hidden. And, nobody needs to know about this. I can get this fixed on my own. And that it doesn't have to be brought into the light, but that's not really what has to happen. Confession is a really important part of this whole walking out of a process, bringing it into the light. And confession, not just between the spouses, which a lot of times is a moot point, because a lot of times people are coming into this because they've been discovered. The sin has been exposed, it's been brought out to the open already, and confession's not so much important between the husband and wife because she's found out, right?
Or he. Yeah, you kept it really well hidden.
I did.
We had been married 4 years at that point in time when you confessed. And so I was pretty shocked. I was very shocked.
Yeah. And for me, it was, confessing it was a way to, well, I just can't see a way out of this. And so divorce is what needs to happen and moving forward with that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I was, I love my first response, but I can't take credit for it because I really think it was God.
Yeah.
He just, there was something that rose up in me that said, no, in fact, hell no, that is not happening. It was just a very strong response. And then later I was just thinking, what did I do?
Right.
This is not good. but I'm glad that was the response, because we wouldn't be here today. Yeah. And we wouldn't have so many amazing, healing experiences with the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugai, where they take a piece of pottery and it's been broken, right? And then they put it back together with this gold inlay, right? And it creates this beautiful gold inlay pattern on top of the pot or the piece of cup or whatever that's been broken. And the thought is that, this thing has become more beautiful and more unique because of the process it's gone through and the brokenness. It's
more valuable too.
More valuable.
Because
and so I think that's a really good representation of this whole process that you go through, in that there's because of this brokenness that you've gone through, there's a strength and a beauty that comes out of that.
Yes.
So I think
I'm getting a little emotional because every time I talk about what the Lord has done in both of our lives, it's overwhelming. It's so huge.
Yeah.
So huge.
So for us, it was that let's go get help. Right. And so we went and we found a counselor, start talking through some of our issues. I went and I found a group to start talking through with a group of guys. And that's super important. You need that support from peers, and there's a fear initially of, well, I mean, everybody's going to hate me, and, this is awful, and nobody's going to understand what I'm going through, and I'm going to be seen as a bad person, but when you have that experience where you've got a group of guys who are also struggling, and you are able to lean on each other and talk through it, it's a really uplifting experience. I mean, there's a real difference between guilt and shame that comes across in that, guilt says I have done something bad and shame says I am bad. Right. And the reality is that, you can have guilt over the experiences that you're having, but that does not make you a bad person. Right. And the enemy, I think, wants to keep you in that place of thinking that you're a bad person because that feeds the whole cycle. That
exactly. It keeps you in the trap.
Mm-hmm.
Can I read a scripture now?
Please.
Okay. Thank you. All right. 1 John chapter 1, verse 9 says, if we freely admit our sins when his light uncovers them, and his light can uncover either by confession or discovery, he will be faithful to forgive us every time, and he will continue to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. That's the Passion Translation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a promise. It's a promise.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we had made a decision to go through the process, regardless of how
painful,
scary, ugly, all of that it looked. Yes.
Yeah. Which, that way, and for us, it was a multi-year process of digging in, and it's not just dealing with, it's not just trying to modify the behavior. I mean, there's deeper issues going on that you have to dig into and you have to be willing to face. Any sort of addiction that you have is a learned behavior to deal with and cope with pain in your life, wounds and things that have happened. And nobody goes through this life without having those. Some people have got very big traumatic events, where it's very obvious to identify, mm-hmm. the brokenness in their lives. And some people have what they call, 1,000 paper cuts, little things that have just accumulated over time. But everybody has got some sort of issues that they have to deal with and they have to face instead of turning to something else to make them feel better. So that's an important part of the process, to start dealing with those things. And it's difficult. But I think you also have to look at it from, not only do you need to bring the Lord into those broken places and have him start dealing with those things, but you also, you've developed a habit now of turning to this thing, and you need to learn new habits and start correcting those as well. So, I mean, I like to think of it as, if you've built a fire in the fireplace, you've got the coals, which are the wounds underneath that are kind of driving all this thing, but you keep throwing wood on the fire. So you need to attack it from both sides. You need to stop the habits of putting wood on the fire, and you need to extinguish the coals underneath that are driving the whole thing as well.
That's really good.
Yeah.
I've never heard you say that before. That's awesome. All right. Nice.
Yeah. Quiet time with the Lord.
What about, so you mentioned earlier accountability. I'm really thankful that you had other accountability sources than me.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was not in a place where I could be an accountability partner. So can you go into who else besides your spouse?
Today's episode of Hope Reforged is brought to you in part by C12, a nationwide mentoring framework of transformation for Christian business leaders. Find community at joinc12.com.
The program that I went through, was a small group session where we had people who were leading it, who had been ahead of us, who had gone through this and were in a healthy place, that could lead the whole session. And that's really important to have that, a mentor of some kind. But it was also, peer to peer. You're talking with other guys who are in the moment, who are struggling with this too, and there's real camaraderie that comes out of that process as well, because you can be there for them. They can be there for you.
You're in the trenches together.
You're in the trenches together.
Yeah.
You're exchanging phone numbers. You're texting each other. You've got some support, and healthy accountability is not like, when I've fallen, I'm going to call somebody and just confess, hey, I slipped back and I relapsed today, and I just wanted to let you know. It's more about, hey, I'm struggling at the moment. Like I'm about to go do something I don't really want to do. can you stop and can you pray with me? Can you, help redirect me? Because it's learning new pathways. It's learning how to figure out when you're about to have a relapse, those indicators that go into that, and then learning new habits and redirecting yourself. That not throwing more wood on the fire of that whole addiction cycle. So that's an important part of the process for sure.
We were going to a counselor.
Yeah.
Just the two of us, who was really, I would say, well versed in sexual addictions, pornography, etc. But there were all the between times that I didn't have any support, and it's different now. So our journey started in 1998. Back then, there really were very few, if any, resources for the spouse. The spouse was kind of left hanging out in the wind, and so we had a great resource with our counselor. But then, what about when I'm alone?
Yeah, because that's like once a week or something, right?
I don't even remember. It's been a while. It's been a while. So I really had to. I had three choices really. One was to press into the Lord. One was to just say, you know what, that's your problem. You deal with it. Go get fixed, and then come back when you're done. Or there was a third option of, well, I'm going to turn to something else that is not the Lord. And so I did delve into workaholism. That was something I was really successful at, was work. And so I used that for a time, and started having more marriage problems because of that. And then, but then the Lord just really was so tender toward me, and He was so generous in making sure that I knew He was there. And so if I would wake up in the middle of the night and my husband's not next to me, I would cry out. I started learning to cry out to the Lord, and He would show up.
Yeah.
I also was reading an old book by Stormy O. Martin called The Power of the Praying Wife. It's a classic. I read that and reread that. Praying through that book was tremendous, huge help during that time. And as I was praying those prayers over you, I started seeing you change. Yes, you were willing to go get help. You were willing to be accountable and transparent, which is huge, very much key in the healing process. But I was reading those prayers and really crying out to the Lord during that time. And so that was a major key as well. We talk about all these different choices that we have. It's really vital to our marriage, to the family in general, to what those choices are is going to determine the outcome of this whole process.
Well, let's talk about the transparency a little bit, because that was difficult for us to walk through in a lot of ways. Because the Lord gave me grace for a season to have be extra transparent with you, right? Because I confessed to you that, hey, I'm struggling with this, and I think part of your process in learning to build trust back with each other was, tell me when is this? I told you. You have the right to come in and ask me anytime.
You gave me permission.
I gave you permission.
That was big.
To, ask me, what's going on, and I'll be completely open and honest with you about, have you looked at pornography today? Yeah, I have. I did. And then we got to have a conversation about that. But even that sounds counterintuitive, because you'd think, okay, well, my husband just told me he went and did this again, and that's going to be a bad thing. And yeah, it is. But there's also, now at least I know he's going to be honest with me when he is struggling with this.
Yes, I went from full-on trust in my husband, that he is for me and that he's doing great things for us, the two of us, to oh my God, can I believe anything?
Yeah.
Because of all this hiddenness, this secret that he's been keeping from me for 4 years. That was a major about face in our marriage. And so every time I was able to go, I was able to go to you and get an honest answer from you. It brought a little bit of peace, even if it was something I didn't want to hear, because there was this, okay, he's being honest with me again, and I'll believe him for the next 30 minutes. At first it was, I want to ask him almost every hour. I want to ask all the time, have you looked at pornography? Have you been tempted? Have you thought about, but then it's just as God was working in my heart and I was turning to him more and more, I was able to relinquish a little bit more, take my clenched hands off of this things and a little bit, release a little bit more and more of trusting, oh yeah, you're working in me, but you're also working in him. And he's being honest with me. And so I can breathe a little bit.
Right. And it wasn't like I was in a place where it's like, well, I'm just in a pornography. I just like pornography and you're just going to have to deal with it. Right. It was me trying to walk out of it. And I was, in the process of going and getting help. You saw that I was on a road to trying to be a better person and get this out of my life.
We say this all the time. It takes both of us to commit to the marriage. It takes both of us to decide we're going down this trail together. Yeah. So I really loved the accountability part that you had. I want to go back to that for a minute because that was so helpful. You were able to reach out to your accountability partners in the middle of the night when you were being tempted for preventative care, let's call it. And they were able to do the same thing with you.
Yeah.
I like that you were fighting for each other's marriages. It's hard to imagine when you're in the middle of it, but there are other people that are willing to fight on your behalf for your marriage.
Getting down in the trenches with you and realizing that you're in this battle together and you've got somebody you can lean on. That's important. Not just husband and wife, but also, brother to brother, sister to sister.
Yes.
And I'm glad that there's a lot more resources out there for wives of husbands and spouses that are dealing with this.
It's a lot better now. Yeah, there are some amazing resources, which we're going to put all of that on our website so people can access it. I would love to point out C12, which I've been a member of for, I think, since 2018. It's been a while. It is a phenomenal group nationwide. In fact, in several other countries, there's a maximum of 12 members for this group. I became a member as a business leader.
Yeah.
And they really help these business leaders learn how to not lead in isolation. Yeah. Because that's a trap in itself, right? Because we can get not just into sexual addiction, but pride and all kinds of other things. Workaholism, yes. And so they are actually sponsoring part of this segment today.
Yeah.
But
great.
But I like it because we can be so open and honest with each other.
Mm-hmm. Accountability in the business is also good. Yep.
Accountability all around.
It's an important thing to have in your life.
Today's episode of Hope Reforged is brought to you in part by C12, a nationwide mentoring framework of transformation for Christian business leaders. Find community at joinc12.com.
Changing our lifestyle, you put boundaries in place for yourself.
Yes.
At the end of the day, all the accountability in the world is not going to help if you don't make changes, if I don't make changes.
Right.
So
one of the things that I did, there's resources out there like Covenant Eyes that you can put on all your devices. I think I gave you, the password to my phone and my computer.
And I changed it. I actually changed the password so that you couldn't go back in and alter the settings.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's
sharp.
That level of transparency that we also had to be able to go back and do those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a lifestyle change where you're starting to create new habits and new neural pathways in your brain and then get out of the old habits that you have made. It's important, I think, part of the process that I go through with guys now is building what we call your arousal template. Knowing when you're likely to get into a relapse. Keeping track of your emotional state. Knowing when stress is building, and so you can start to see where that's starting to lead, and keeping track of that, in a daily journal, is very helpful to be able to know when an relapse is impending. But also, like, knowing, some people are going to give themselves permission. Well, I've had a really stressful day, and therefore it's okay for me to do this. The lies that you tell yourself and the falsehoods that you build around this whole supporting this habit. Or some people are going to say, well, I've had a really good day and therefore I can reward myself. There's all sorts of strategies and things, that maybe you're not, if you say them out loud, you're like, well, that's really stupid, but the reality is you build this sort of falsehoods around this sort of ritual of, going and looking at the pornography and having this moment. That's unhealthy. So, learning how to develop new strategies and new habits, and recognizing when you're starting to fall into those old traps so that you can redirect yourself earlier on, as opposed to, now I'm in the moment and I'm really like just seconds away from doing something I don't want to do. And that's a much harder process to redirect at that point.
Tell me about a positive action you would take.
So, for me, a lot of times, it was when I was under stress and I was headed towards a situation where I would try to find myself a place where I could find isolation, because you want to do this in private. So it was, okay, I'm going to redirect myself and get myself into a situation where I can do something socially. Right. I'm going to go spend time with you. Or I'm going to go spend time with a friend, or I'm going to call somebody, or I'm going to get myself out of the private place that I want to be at and go do something with people.
Is that why we had so many people over to our house? It's
Could have
time
been
for another party.
Right.
Just kidding.
I mean, there is a certain degree of that, right? I mean, not necessarily like parties and stuff, but just learning new habits of, I think negatively you want to, like I said, you want to isolate and you want to do this in private. And so maybe redirecting yourself into, doing something with friends is a healthy thing.
Today's episode of Hope Reforged is brought to you in part by C12, a nationwide mentoring framework of transformation for Christian business leaders. Find community at joinc12.com.
Well, I mean, I remember, as we, part of the whole process is, not only just dealing with, okay, I got to change my habits, but also dealing with the wounds. Right. And so you've got a lot of things that are buried from your childhood that you have to start bringing out into the light and exposing and dealing with. And there's just a lot of freedom that comes out of that, having, facing things that are buried from your parents, things that are buried from school and other relationships, and self-doubts and other things that you start to address, and you start to bring the Lord in, and he starts to change those thought processes, those lies and those vows that you've made about who you are. And he breaks those, and then you start to your personality will begin to change.
Oh, it's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. I saw you open up, not just to me, but in general. I saw you open up to just where you were incredibly guarded.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I almost want to call you shady.
Uh-huh.
But then you just became more alive, and it's like, oh, this is the guy that I dated. I remember this person. It was fun, to be around you again. It was enjoyable because you weren't all, you weren't in that place of shame and thinking
bondage.
that you were a bad person. Now you're realizing who you really were. Your true identity in Christ. Who He called you to be. Your purpose was much bigger than going and getting your next fix.
Well, there's a lot of self-hatred too that you're constantly dealing with, and is constantly you're seeing the world through, these tinted glasses about, I don't really like myself and I don't like who I am.
Right.
As you start to deal with that, you get on the other side of it, and you become, like I said, you become a better person. I think you become a healthier person with a better outlook and a better disposition on life.
Do you like yourself now?
I like myself now. Yeah.
I do too.
Okay. Well, good. And and the marriage becomes, I think, a stronger and a healthier thing, having walked through that on the other side of it. There's a lot more trust between us. Having been through something difficult like this, we can lean on each other. There's a lot more, I think, grace for each other, having walked through that.
I broke my arm on an ice skating rink one time, and I can still feel the part in my arm where it broke. It's thicker, it's just the same thing with marriage. It gets stronger when you go through trials. If you go through it in a way that brings life, and I think we accomplished that.
Yeah. Go team.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think
Accomplished that with the Lord. I mean, it was not on our own.
No.
When you say team, it was not just two.
No, it was three chord stronger than two. Yeah. Even though there's brokenness and it's terrible and horrible, the restored process at the end of that can be, something really even more beautiful than it was before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what we want to turn this into for people, is that they can have a resource for, having their hope reforged.
Thank you for joining us on Hope Reforged. Together, we can break the chains of addiction and rebuild hope. To stay connected, visit us at www.hopereforged.com, where you'll find new episodes, resources, and support. If you found this helpful, please leave us a review and share it with someone who would be encouraged by this podcast. Until next time, persevere, lean into hope, and remember that restoration is yours.